In the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, I declare martial law over the northern provinces of Nigeria. Those were the words of Major Chukwuma Nzeogu Kaduna's speech announcing the January 15, 1966 coup. Since that day, much has been said and written about Nigeria's first military coup. Despite the wealth of information, including accounts from some of the participants of that coup, the truth about the January 15, 1966 coup remains elusive and difficult to accept. This is one of the pivotal events that set Nigeria on a dangerous path from which it has yet to recover. Before we dive into today's discussion, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel or followed us on our various social media platforms and you find value in our contents, we'd love for you to join our community. Please take a moment to hit the subscribe button using the handle on the screen. Give this video a thumbs up and share your opinion or your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoy what we do, consider sharing this video with at least 2 people in your network. It truly helps us to grow. The question of whether the coup of 1966 was an Igbo coup has haunted the nation since the brutal end of Nigeria's first republic. This debate resurfaced recently with the launch of General Ibrahim Babangida's book. While I haven't read the book personally, the book reportedly reflects on the coup, suggesting that the plotters were driven more by ideology than by ethnic sentiments. IBB is said to have argued that Major Kaduna, a key figure in that coup, was an Igbo in name only, being culturally and linguistically Hausa, having been born and raised in Kaduna. However, some analysts disagree, asserting that the coup was indeed an Igbo coup. They point to the emergence of General Ironsi, an Igbo man, as head of state after the coup, which fueled suspicions of ethnic motivations and contributed to the counter-coup later that year, as well as the brutal civil war that followed 3 years later. Even if we assume, as some argue, that the coup was ideological and aimed at eradicating corruption and bad governance, labeling it an Igbo coup stems from the actions of the plotters and the words and deeds of some Igbo leaders before and after the coup, and the ethnic identities of both the plotters and the ultimate beneficiaries. Whether Major Kaduna Nzeogu was Igbo or not is immaterial. The coup was perceived as an Igbo coup because the majority of the plotters were Igbo. Their targets were non-Igbo, and other factors reinforce this perception. Today, some Nigerians accuse the Hausa Fulani of dominating Nigeria. However, the battle for dominance was historically fought between the Igbo and the Hausa Fulani. The Fulani won. Had the Igbo won, they might face the same accusations of dominance that the Hausa Fulani face today. While I cannot provide empirical evidence for this perspective of mine in this video, it is worth noting that as far back as 1945, Charles Dadi Oyema, a member of the Central Legislative Council representing Enugu, declared at an Igbo State of the Union address that the domination of Nigeria and Africa by the Igbo is only a matter of time. This statement, made in the presence of prominent Igbo leaders, likely resonated with many of them. Some analysts argue that such sentiments marked the beginning of disunity in southern Nigerian politics. 3 years later, in July 1948, Chief Nnamdi Azikiwe openly proclaimed that the God of the Igbo would eventually grant them leadership of Nigeria and of Africa. How could the public, especially young Igbo officers who already viewed the Northerners as competition, process such statements from prominent Igbo leaders? If Babangida indeed claimed that the coup was not an Igbo coup, it seems less likely a historical clarification and more like an attempt to revise history and endear himself to the Igbo people. If Babangida truly believed that the coup was not an Igbo coup, does that mean he dismissed the Igbo's claim of marginalization in Nigeria since then as unjust? When did Babangida arrive at this conclusion? Up until this is book, I am unaware of any instance where Babangida made such a claim that the coup was not an Igbo coup. This is the same man who served as president for 8 years. What did he do during that time to foster a greater sense of belonging for the Igbo? While it is true that his late wife's father was Igbo, what concrete actions did Babangida take to address his so-called misrepresentation of the coup as an Igbo coup when he had the power to do so? Even his first vice president, Commodore Ebitu Okiwe, an Igbo man, served only 1 year in office before he was unceremoniously removed from office by the same Babangida. If a coup was led by middle-ranked officers, predominantly from Igbo land, can it be called a Yoruba coup or Hausa coup? Babangida reportedly argued that Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzego, the most prominent face of the coup, was Igbo only in name. However, intelligence reports suggested that the true mastermind of the coup was Major Emmanuel Ifeanjuna, a core Igbo man from Igbo land who was born in Anambra State. Though Babangida was only 24 years old and the second lieutenant at the time of the coup, he cannot deny that his fellow officers held views contrary to what he now claims in his book. These views were strong enough to provoke the counter-coup of July 29, 1966, which ultimately led to the Civil War. The counter-coup is labeled a northern coup because it was led by northern officers. Why should we hesitate to call the preceding one an Igbo coup, given that it was also led by Igbo officers? Babangida, true to his nature, seemed less than honest here, perhaps to bask in the praise that has followed his claim since his book's launch. This supposed claim has suddenly transformed him into a hero and a credible historian in some quarters, with some even demanding reparations for the Igbo people, as though the atrocities of Babangida's 8-year dictatorship have suddenly been erased. Ahmadu Bello, his wife Ashfatu, and the Sardona's personal guard were all killed, even though they did not resist arrest. How can this be called an ideological coup? How does killing a guard who surrendered willingly align with any ideology? While it could be argued that Major Kaduna and perhaps Adewale Ademoyega, based on the latter's account in Why We Struck, had some ideological motivations, for most of the plotters, the coup was ethnically driven. This is evident from the series of events that appeared disproportionately favorable to the eastern region at the time of that coup. Major Kaduna was known to tell officers at the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna, where he was chief instructor, to wait until the day you will look at the senior officers through the sights of your rifles. End of quote. One officer was concerned enough to report him to their superior, Colonel Ralph Shodeinde and Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun. While Shodeinde did not act against his subordinates, he remarked, "There is never smoke without fire, even if it is smoldering fire." Brigadier Ademulegun, commander of the 1st Brigade in Kaduna, described Major Kaduna as a young man in a hurry who should be closely watched. End of quote. Tragically, both men paid for their inaction with their lives in the early hours of January 15, 1966. One of the soldiers who attacked Sir Ahmadu Bello's residence alongside Major Kaduna was reportedly killed. According to accounts, Major Kaduna shot him for refusing to fire the anti-tank weapon used on the premier's house. Policemen on guard duty at the residence were also reportedly shot, and Major Kaduna himself was said to have been wounded during the attack. Major Kaduna and his officers were responsible for numerous deaths that night of January 15, 1966. What then is ideological about this harvest of deaths? Leading politicians and military officers from every region of the country, except in Igbo land, were killed. Among the victims were the Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa, the Premier of the Western Region, Chief S.L. Akintola, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Federal Minister of Finance, Chief Festus Okotiebo, Brigadier Zakari Mai Malari, Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun, Colonel Ralph Shodeinde, Lieutenant Colonel James Yakubu Pam, Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Laigema, and many others. Reports suggest that some of these leaders were not only killed but also mocked, tortured, and maimed beforehand. Accounts claim that the plotters took photographs of their victims' mutilated bodies and, in some cases, killed their wives and children, even those who did not resist arrests, like I mentioned earlier. Femi Fani-Kayode, a former Minister of Aviation, wrote that some Igbo people celebrated these killings openly in the streets and markets of northern cities. They allegedly displayed pictures and posters of Sarduana's mutilated body with Major Kadina's boot on his neck, while loudly playing music or playing an offensive anti-northern songs. Jubilant Igbo crowds reportedly boasted that they had ended northern rule and Islamic domination and declared that the Igbo would now rule all of Nigeria forever. Despite the widespread killings, Captain Joseph Ihediobo and two other Igbo officers were tasked with securing the Midwestern and the Eastern regions. The Igbo Premier of the Midwest, Mr. Osadebe, and the Eastern Region's Premier, Dr. Michael Opara, were spared in that coup. One report suggests that Opara's life was saved because the head of state of Cyprus, Archbishop Makarios, was his guest at the time. Lieutenant Oguchi, assigned to arrest Opara, reportedly spared him as he was argued to be an advocate, as he was renowned to be an advocate of a bloodless coup. Major Okafor, commander of the Federal Guards, responsible for the Prime Minister's security, delegated the task of arresting Sir Tafawa Balewa to Major Ifenjuna. Balewa's death remains shrouded in controversy. While a special branch report claims that Ifenjuna killed him, late Dr. Matthew Mbu, a minister in Balewa's government, stated in a 2010 interview that Balewa died from health complications. Mbu's source was said to be the renowned Igbo poet Christopher Okibo, a very close friend of Ifenjuna. Other accounts suggest that Balewa was beaten before his death and that Balewa even placed the curse on the Igbo nation. Ifenjuna is also said to have killed Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Laigema. The plotters also killed Chief Okotebo. When Lieutenant Colonel Pam was arrested by Major Chukwuka, his second in command and friend, Chukwuka assured Pam's family that no harm would come to Colonel Pam. However, Major Anuforo, who outranked Chukwuka and harbored resentment towards Pam for his role in the 1964 thieves operation, ignored Chukwuka's objection and shot Lieutenant Pam. What ideology justifies such acts of vendetta? Brigadier Mailami managed to escape but unknowingly flagged down Ifenjuna's car, believing it to be a rescue since the man was supposed to be answerable to him as a superior. Instead, he was gunned down by his supposed saviors. Ironsi's escape marked the beginning of the coup's unraveling. Speculations abound that his survival was not entirely due to his own abilities. Olusegun Obasanjo, former president, in one of his books recounted that one of the plotters, Orji, hesitated to pull the trigger when he encountered the escaping general on Kata Bridge. Both men hailed from the same village of Umueha, axis of Igbo land, and fraternal ties may have stayed Orji's hands from shooting his superior. The question arises, if Ironsi had not been Igbo, would Orji have refrained from shooting him that night? Frederick Forsyth in The Biafra Story offers a different perspective, suggesting that Ironsi intimidated Orji's men at the roadblock into letting him pass. Regardless, it is evident that Ironsi's ethnicity played a significant role in his survival. Interestingly, Ironsi had attended a boat party in Apapa after Mailarami's reception that evening. Some analysts argue that Major Obienu, an Igbo man who skipped the coup plotters' meeting at Ifejuna's house but attended Malari's party, may have tipped Ironsi off about the coup. After his escape, Ironsi initiated countermeasures. As the general officer commanding GOC of the army, he commanded the loyalty of officers, had unrestricted access to military installations, and could coordinate with the police, sister services agencies, and government agencies. He also had the authority to seek foreign military assistance with government approval. Meanwhile, Nwobisi and his team took control of the western region, arresting Deputy Premier Remi Fani-Kayode and killing Premier Samuel Akintola in a shootout. They then headed to the Federal Guards unit in Lagos with Fani-Kayode in custody, only to be intercepted by Ironsi's men, who had regained control of the area at the time. With the support of the military and police officers, Ironsi suppressed the coup in Lagos. Most of the plotters, except Anuforo and Ademoyega, fled. The apparent joint escape of Ifejuna and Okafor introduced an element of betrayal within the ranks of the coup plotters. Ademoyega later wrote in his book that Ifejuna, Okafor and Chukwuka failed to show up at their prearranged rendezvous. What kind of ideology inspires such treachery? An ideology its proponents were unwilling to die for? In the north, Major Kaduna succeeded but received no update from Lagos. The absence of a broadcast, apart from an announcement about dissident soldiers mutinying, left him in the dark. He eventually went on air with his infamous broadcast. This created two power centers in Nigeria at the time, the north under Major Kaduna and the south under Ironsi. War seemed to be imminent as Major Kaduna was determined to complete the coup. It took a written agreement and the intervention of Lieutenant Colonel Conrad Nwanwo, another Igbo man and Kaduna's former teacher and a figure he deeply respected, to persuade him to travel to Lagos. The agreement stipulated that Major Kaduna and his colleagues will not be tried for their actions, that detained plotters would be released, that the overthrown leaders would not be reinstated, and that the families of military personnel killed in the coup will be compensated. This may explain why Ironsi, against all advice, chose not to prosecute the coup plotters, a decision that later fueled the counter-coup. Major Kaduna handed over the governorship of the north to Major Hassan Usman Katsina, son of the Emir of Katsina, before flying to Lagos, where he was arrested by Ironsi's men and detained. Before this, Major General GTU Aguye Ironsi, an Igbo officer who suspiciously escaped the young Igbo plotters' wrath, joined acting President Nwanfo Orizu and the Igbo political leadership of the time. Together, they reportedly summoned the remnants of Sir Tafawa Balewa's cabinet to a closed-door meeting where they allegedly threatened their lives and seized power at gunpoint. Ironsi reportedly told the cabinet members that he could not guarantee their safety if they refused to hand power over to him. Meanwhile, Orizu refused to fulfill his duty as acting president by swearing in Zana Buka the Charima as acting prime minister, despite pleas from the cabinet and the British ambassador. At that point, there was a power vacuum as Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa was missing and presumed murdered. Alhaji Maitaima Sule, Chief Richard Akinjide, and President Shehu Shagari, all of them ministers in Balewa's government at the time, were present at that meeting. None of these men, until their death, ever claimed that the January 1966 coup was not an Igbo coup. Reports from certain quarters suggested that 70% of the Nigerian army officers at the time were all Igbo, that Igbo individuals held key positions such as vice chancellors of universities, even in the Yoruba land, and that the civil service was dominated predominantly by Igbo personnel, highlighting the perceived quest for dominance that drove the Igbo consciousness at the time. The coup plotters revered Chief Awolowo, a Yoruba man and prominent figure in Nigeria's independent movement, who was in prison at the time for allegedly leading a 1962 plot to overthrow the Balewa government by force. Their plan was to release him from prison in Calabar and potentially make him president. However, analysts emphasize that the plotters acted independently and did not have Chief Awolowo's blessings or support in that their quest. Ifejuna even wrote that had Awolowo refused to cooperate, he would have been confined in the State House with decrees issued in his name. Awolowo's radical ideology and leadership had garnered admiration among many young among officers and civilians at the time. 6 months later, on July 29, 1966, General Ronsi, along with over 300 Igbo officers, was massacred in a single night during a revenge coup led by northern officers, including Lieutenant Colonel Murtala Mohammed, Major Abba Kyari, Captain Martins Adamo, Major T.Y. Danjuma, Major Musa Usman, Captain Joseph Gaba, Captain Shitu Alao, Captain Baba Usman, Captain Gimson Jalil, and Captain Shehu Musa Yaradua, as they then were. This group installed Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon as head of state. Just weeks later, between September 29 and mid-October of 1966, an estimated 50,000 Igbo civilians were brutally killed in a series of pogroms in the north by enraged mobs, avenging the January 15, 1966 coup and the deaths of northern leaders. These tragic, regrettable, and senseless killings culminated in a full-scale, costly civil war, devastating both Nigerian and Biafran side. The story of the war will be a subject of another video, but it bears noting that the first coup remains a pivotal moment in Nigeria's history, shaping the series of events that followed. Almost all of his leading plotters were Igbo or Igbo-speaking, while nearly all his victims were non-Igbo. Ironsi, who crushed the coup and became head of state, was also Igbo. It was an Igbo coup that should never have occurred, a tragic chapter where children like those of Officer Ademulogun and his wife witnessed their parents gunned down by trusted family friends. It bred deep ethnic hatred and distrust. While the government of the day undeniably failed the country at the time, and the plotters may have believed they were fostering change, their actions unleashed far worse consequences than the problem they sought to resolve. Chief among them, the counter-coup of July 29, 1966, and the ensuing civil war. Many of the key actors in these events have since passed away. It now falls upon the current generation to rise above this dark history and build a unified, indivisible nation. However, no one, not even a past ruler, should rewrite the history of this country.
If you've enjoyed this video and like to see more content like this, please help support our growth by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our various social media handles, and please do send us a little donation to help us continue making more content like this.